Hello everyone. We are going to start with our last unit for this semester. It's going to cover the digestive system, and today we're going to cover the anatomy part for digestive system, the GI tract anatomy today. And I'd like you to read your textbook from page 868 to 889, and also from 906 to 910. So read these two parts before you watch this video. After you finish watching this lecture, you need to print out your lab handout. It is posted on Canvas and print it out. So your lab handout will be your anatomy guide to study the anatomy structures from the online models and also histology pictures. Okay, so let's start with the anatomy lecture. So let me get to my shared screen here. Okay, so we are talking about digestive system. So as you know, the main function for this system is to digest food and absorb nutrients. All right, so in for overview here, this picture, you saw this one in your 430 already. You know, in general, we have this GI tract. Okay, start from mouth, all right, all the way down, esophagus here, stomach, and small intestine and large intestine. All right, that's called the GI tract. Okay, we have the GI tract. Also, we have the accessory digestive organs such as the salivary glands, the tongue, the teeth, the liver, the pancreas. Those are called accessory digestive organs. In terms of the processes taking place in the digestive system, we have ingestion, that's you take in food, and propulsion, that's the food being swallowed and move downwards, and also mechanical digestion, like use your teeth to break down big particles into smaller ones, is a mechanical process, no chemical reactions there. And also we have chemical digestion, which is the process, chemical processes digest big molecules and make smaller ones. This process takes place in GI tract. Okay, and also we have absorptions. So the small molecules, that's what we call nutrients, such as glucose, amino acids, fatty acids, small fat. Those molecules can be absorbed into eventually into the blood and then send it to liver so we can make our own proteins, our own fat, and our own carbohydrates. And then the last process is the defecation, to get rid of waste. So that is the in general the process. So when we say GI tract, if you look at this diagram, we can review the parts for the GI tract. So start from the mouth, and then right here, remember this is oral pharynx, and then we get down to the laryngopharynx. This is the part that air and food share, this part of the tubular structure. And after that, we get into the esophagus. You look, this esophagus is very long and is a tubular structure, allow food to move toward to the stomach. The very last inch of esophagus actually penetrate the diaphragm and into the abdominal cavity and connected to the stomach, right? And then stomach is connected to the small intestine. Small intestine, there are three parts. The first part, which connected to the stomach, is called duodenum. Duodenum is very, very short. You know, if you put your 10 fingers together, that's about the length of duodenum. All right. The next part connected to the duodenum is called the jejunum. That's pretty long. Okay. And then ileum is connected to the jejunum. So if you put all these parts for small intestine together, the length can be over 20 feet. So think about 20 feet, that's pretty long tubular structure. We do need to have this long structure so the digested molecules moving down in these tubular structures, which will allow enough time for absorptions, you know, getting goodies from this small intestine structure. And connected to the small intestine is the large intestine. So if you remember, the large intestine started with ascending colon, and then transverse colon, and descending colon, sigmoid colon, rectum, anal canal. Those are the parts for large intestine. Okay, so basically this is an overview for the GI tract. The anatomy part is what we're going to cover today. Next time, we're going to cover the accessory organs and also the chemical digestion processes. All right, so this this is it. On this side, on the right side, is a sagittal view for abdominal cavity. Abdominal cavity right here. So this part is showing the liver, the cross section of the stomach, okay, and then the cross section of the pancreas. Transverse colon cross section. So kind of oriented, think about this over and see if you could make sense of these. And those are the cross sections of small intestine. Okay, this part is a duodenum. Let me go back. All right, so here basically you make a cut right here. So you can see this cross section of stomach, cross section of the duodenum, and cross section of transverse colon and small intestine over here. Okay, let me see. Oops, sorry. All right, so one more time. This is a sagittal view, anterior part, posterior part. Okay, cross section of stomach, liver, pancreas, duodenum, transverse colon, small intestine. And then landmark here, urinary bladder over here, and rectum over here. Okay, so in the abdominal cavity, we have a serous membrane, which is called a peritoneum. If you remember that, if this peritoneum is lining the cavity, it is called the parietal peritoneum. If it's covering on the surface of the organ, it is called the visceral peritoneum. Okay, and then inside the abdominal cavity, because we have so many organs and some of them are really long and big, like the intestines, okay, we got to have a good way to organize all these tubular structures. Otherwise they might like a tangling and move to all different directions. So we got to have a way to hold them in position, and also to have efficient way for blood vessels and nerves to travel to all parts of these organs. So that's why we have a structure inside the abdominal cavity is called a mesentery. Mesenteries. to organize these organs in certain ways. If you remember the mesenteries, do you remember this word? The mesentery is made by two layers of biomembranes travel side by side, kind of like a sandwich. We talked about this in the reproductive system. Okay, the mesentery is the two membranous structures, and in between these two membranous structures, you can have blood vessels and nerves travel in between. Okay, so these mesenteries in the abdominal cavity, they're very, very important. So we need to spend a little bit time to look at these mesenteries. Let me see if I can draw on this. I don't know if I can draw this. I used this before. Let's see if I can find it again. No, here it is. Pointer, pen, highlighter. Let's do that. No, it's not a highlighter. How about using a pen? Can I draw? Okay, I can start drawing here. Ooh, good. Okay, so what am I drawing here is the parietal peritoneum lining the cavity. Yes, everyone? Okay, and then on this side, we can continue right here. Parietal peritoneum, right here. Parietal peritoneum. Okay, so now look at this duodenum right here. It's outside of the peritoneum. Okay, it's not inside. This is called a retroperitoneal organ. It is outside of the peritoneum. So if you think about rectum, is that retroperitoneal organ? Yes. How about the urinary bladder? Yes. Retroperitoneal organ. Kidneys are retroperitoneal as well. Okay, so now this part you need to pay attention now. Okay, maybe let me draw this part first. Okay, so I'm still drawing the parietal peritoneum lining the cavity. Okay, now at anterior part, okay, now you see it make a U-turn and go toward to liver. And then at the liver, it's going to cover the surface of liver. So this part is called the visceral peritoneum, right? And then continue to go and then to the stomach and start to cover the stomach. Are you following me? Okay, so now if I do from this side, remember we finished this side, we do not continue. So this is the parietal peritoneum lining the anterior abdominal wall, and then right here it starts to travel toward to the liver and then covers part of the liver and then travels toward to the stomach and covers the stomach and then goes down. All right, this part is tricky. Let me see if I can do it well. Okay, so it's a long serous membrane structure and then make a U-turn over here and then covers the transverse colon and then connect it to the posterior wall, the peritoneal, parietal peritoneum, okay? And also from this side of the stomach, okay, it travels down and make a U-turn, come up, and then covers transverse colon, and then connect to the posterior wall. All right, so if you look at the small intestine, it's the similar way. All right, so this is the parietal peritoneum, okay, going toward the small intestine, cover small intestine, and travel back, and then go cover small intestine like that. I'm not doing very well, did I? Okay. Oops, what did I do? Okay, so let's just try to do this. All right, so in this drawing here, if you see right here, is that two membranous structures travel side by side? Yes, so that is the mesentery. How about here? Mesentery. How about here? Mesentery. How about here? Mesentery. How about here? Along all small intestine? Mesenteries. Okay, so by definition, we say mesenteries are two membranous structures travel side by side, right? And also in between this mesentery structure, blood vessels and nerves can travel, kind of make a sandwich structure. Okay, so these are mesenteries. So if you look at these mesenteries, you can see that because of this peritoneal membrane structure, it can kind of organize all the abdominal organs in a way so hold to them so they don't, move freely inside of abdominal cavity. So I hope you got this part. So let me see if I can clear this part. I don't know how to clear this part here. Hold on. Okay, I don't know how to clear this part, but I can go back and come back to this one. Okay, let's do this. Oops, it is still there. Huh. All right, anyway. So these are called mesenteries, and these mesenteries, because they're in the abdominal cavity, they have very important functions. So we have specific names for these mesenteries, kind of like the mesenteries we talked about in the female reproductive system. The broad ligament, you have different parts of the mesenteries, you have different names. Okay, this on this side is a frontal view. Okay, so this is on the side is a sagittal view, this one is a frontal view. So if you look at this part, okay, this is the transverse colon. Okay, so what is this part? Okay, this is the membranous structures. If you see from the sagittal cut, it is this part. Let me use a different color. Okay, so it is this part. Okay, so on this one, on the sagittal view, you see this part is like a line, right? But if you go to the frontal look, it's this part. Okay? It's a sheet looking structure. Okay, so that is definitely a mesentery. Okay, kind of like an apron. All right, so this apron structure is made by two layers of serous membrane, and then once they get to the transverse colon, these two layers separate to cover this transverse colon, and then they're going together again over here, and then connected to the posterior wall. So that on this sagittal view is going to be here. I hope you got it. Okay. All right. So that's in the mesentery. So now let me give you the specific names of these mesenteries. All right. Number one Okay, number one is the one, oh, where's my name? Okay, so now, darn it. Okay, number one is this one. That's number one, which is the mesentery connects the liver and the stomach. All right, and then number two is this one, which connects the stomach and transverse colon. Number two. Number three is this one, which connects the transverse colon to the posterior wall. All right, and then here's the number four right here. Number four, which connects the liver to the anterior wall. Okay, so far I'm looking at four different ones. Okay, let me go back. I really want to get rid of these lines. Let me see if I can do that. Hold on one second. Oh, is that permanently regional? Oh, bummer. I should use the annotation. Oh, this one is okay. Oh, still there. Bummer. Well, okay. We have to deal with it. But you probably want to use your book. The picture probably is better than this now. So the first one we said it is connecting what? Liver and stomach. This one is called lesser omentum. Lesser omentum. And the next one is connecting stomach to the transverse colon right here. Okay, this one is called greater omentum. So there's a lesser, there's a greater omentum, two of them. The third one connects the transverse colon to the posterior wall, which is called the transverse mesocolon. Okay, number four is this one. Okay, connects the liver to the anterior wall. It is called a falciform ligament. So four mesenteries I gave you. Okay, the lesser omentum, which connect blank and blank organs, liver and stomach. The greater omentum connects, the greater omentum connects the stomach and transverse colon. The third one, the transverse mesocolon connects the transverse colon to the posterior wall. Number four, the falciform ligament connects the liver to the anterior wall. Oh, I do have an eraser. Yes. I am so smart. Oh. Okay, so now we can, it's much better now. Okay, let me get my regular arrow. Oops, that's not what I want. Okay, so let's look at this here. Okay, the four uh, mesenteries, one more time. Greater omentum connects stomach and transverse colon. So is this part of greater omentum? Yes. Okay. Lesser omentum connects liver and stomach right here. Transverse mesocolon connects transverse colon to the posterior wall. On this picture is right here. Okay. And then the number 4 is called a falciform ligament, connects the liver to the anterior wall. All right. So those are the 4 important mesenteries I want you to know. How about these? You know, the membranous structures organizing the small intestines. These are mesenteries as well, but they don't have specific names. You can just say they're mesenteries. Okay, so this diagram over here, I have this diagram for you to review by yourself. So you can use this, you can print it out and use this to help you to practice labeling the structures. Okay, this one kind of give you an idea. So if you want to trace these mesenteries by yourself one more time, you can do that. Okay, trace the mesenteries and then label them. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the wall structure. So GI tract is a tubular structure. So in general, these all parts of this GI tract, they share some common wall structures. So this one is in general a wall structure. Okay, this one actually is a small intestine. Okay, is this a small intestine? No, it's not. We just say it's a general wall structure in the abdominal cavity. Okay, so from inside, let's start from the deepest side. Okay, this pink layer of cells definitely is epithelial cells, is a simple columnar cells. Okay, and also let's see if I can enlarge this a little bit. No, I can't. Oh, here, I can do that. Okay, so if you see these lining cells, these are simple columnar epithelial cells. This layer is called a mucosa layer. Mucosa layer. That's the deepest layer lining the cavity. Okay, lining the cavity right here. So under mucosa, epithelium, of course, for different part of the GI tract, this epithelium can be different. If we just say it is a small intestine, then it's a simple columnar epithelial cells. And I will give you more specific cell type when we get to different parts of the GI tract. Under this epithelial lining, we have lamina propria. This is made by areolar connective tissue because this is the remember, areolar connective tissue function as glue to glue different types of cells together. So here is the lamina propria is made by areolar connective tissue. And then outside of this lamina propria, it is called muscularis mucosa. Muscularis mucosa. This is definitely is a smooth muscle cells, but it's only like 1 or 2 layers, and it is part of a mucosa. So that's why we call it muscularis mucosa. Okay, if you look at these smooth muscle cells, they're running in the longitudinal way. Okay, so if you do a cross section, you see dots of this red part. Okay, the red is the smooth muscle cells, the dots are the nuclei. Okay, So this whole structure right here is a mucosal layer, and you can see these lining cells, epithelial cells, will engulfed in to form this specific structure. It is gland. So it has a name. It's called gland in mucus. So the secretion will be the mucus, all right? Gland mucus, secrete the mucus. And also in this simple columnar epithelial lining, between the columnar cells, you may have goblet cells which can secrete mucus as well. Okay, so far I gave you two sources for mucus. One is from goblet cells, one is from glands in mucosa. Both of these glands are located in the mucosa layer. Okay, outside of mucosa is another connective tissue layer. This is called the submucosa. So if you see this extension structure from the epithelial cells here, this extending part actually deep engulfed inside the or into the submucosa layer. So to form another type of glands. So these glands, they're not in the mucosa, but in the submucosa right here. These are called the gland in submucosa. Okay, gland in submucosa. In terms of secretion, it is a mucus again. So there are three different sources for mucus. One from goblet cells, two from glands in the mucosa, three from the glands in the submucosa. And then outside of the submucosa will be the next layers called the muscularis externa. This one is called muscularis externa to distinguish this muscle layer from this muscularis mucosa right here. This layer is part of the mucosa, and then this is the main muscular layer here. On this diagram, you can see the deeper ones are circular muscles and outer ones are longitudinal muscles. Okay, so right here, longitudinal, circular. Okay, and then the surface of this tubular structure is covered by serous membrane. Okay, so if you remember serous membrane, it is the same structure as the peritoneum, as the pericardium, as the pleura. They're made by simple squamous epithelial cells and areolar connective tissue. So this is called, in GI tract, is called the serosa. Serosa right here is the simple squamous epithelial cell layer. Underneath is areolar connective tissue. So two of these layers, squamous cells and areolar together is called serosa. Okay, so now if you think about this is a small intestine, so the covering on the surface, this serosa, is actually the visceral peritoneum. Okay, and then this is one layer of peritoneum. This is another layer of peritoneum, and then they merge, they go together side by side. So this part is definitely a mesentery. Okay, so now you can see between the two membranous structures, there are blood vessels and nerves traveling. So all these tubular structures can be precisely delivered to each part of the GI tract. Okay, one more time. For the general tubular structure, we have three layers: mucosa, four layers: mucosa, submucosa, muscularis externa, and serosa. Okay, so if you look at this part of the GI tract, the esophagus, Okay, most of the esophagus, they are inside of thoracic cavity. Remember, I mentioned only the very last inch of esophagus penetrate the diaphragm and connects to the small intestine, connects to the stomach. So only the very distal 1 inch of esophagus actually is covered on the surface with serosa, the peritoneum. Okay, the parts of the esophagus in the thoracic activity, the outside layer is actually just adventitia. It's just the connective tissue. Okay, so then this is the stomach and then intestine. All right. Okay, let me go back here. And so in terms of the accessory organs, I mentioned, we have the teeth, tongue, salivary glands, liver, pancreas, all these we're going to cover next time. So the next few slides actually is the histology slides for salivary glands. So I'm going to wait on these pictures, and then I'll come back next time to talk about the salivary gland structure. Okay, so we continue on the tubular structure. The wall structure I gave you is the general view of the tubular wall. Okay, now we're going to look at the specific parts on this GI tract. The first part is the esophagus. Okay, esophagus. If you look at where this cut is made here, is closer to the stomach. Okay, so this is the cross section, esophagus, lumen. Okay, the lining right here is if you look at the longitudinal lining here, right here, this is a lumen. Okay, this is the lining from here all the way to here is the lining. Okay, is the mucosa layer. This is the mucosa layer. So you see there's a dramatic changes from here. This is how wide this part to this one, how thin this one, narrow this one is, because from esophagus to the stomach, the lining part changes. Okay, in the majority part of esophagus is lined with stratified, non-cornified, stratified squamous epithelial cells. So this one is in our advantage because the food, when you first swallow down, still have a lot of large particles, can be rough surface, can damage your lining. So if you remember squamous cells, stratified squamous cells, they can repair and regenerate really well for if there's any damage on this lining, it can be repaired automatically. Okay, once they get closer to the stomach, this lining start to change to simple columnar epithelial cells with microvilli. Okay, simple columnar cells with microvilli. All right, so if you look at this cross section, remember the tubular structure, we have 4 layers: mucosa, submucosa, muscularis externa, and outside, because this one is still in the thoracic cavity, then it is adventitia. If it passes the diaphragm, then the very outer layer, superficial layer, will be serosa. Okay, all right, so let's see, this is the esophagus. Okay, so this is the tubular structure which allow the food particles to pass. Okay, mostly the gravity will help, and also peristalsis, the smooth muscle cell movement, will help to push the food particles down. So this tubular structure mostly just the path for the food particles. Hardly any digestion takes place here. We're talking both the mechanical and, or we can say physical and chemical digestions, almost none. Okay, no significant amount of digestions take place in the esophagus. For that reason, not very many of the glands or enzymes secreted into the lumen here. If you do see some glands, it will be close to the distal part of this esophagus. When it gets closer to the stomach, in this wall structure, you may see some glands, mucosal and submucosal glands. All right, so this one give you another view right here. The lining here, lumen is over here, stratified squamous epithelial cells. And here you have a muscle layer, all right, and here is the lamina propria, all right, and you can see this big structure. This is the lymphoid follicle. Okay, remember the lymphoid follicle, outside you have T cells, inside you have B cells. All right, so it's under the lining here for to detect any abnormal stuff running through this tubular structure. All right, so right here you see this is a lining, stratified squamous epithelial cells, areolar connective tissue, and then you're going to see this. These are the typical gland structure. You see this a cross section of the gland, all right, and made by kind of like a cuboidal epithelial cells. All right, so this is specialized epithelial cells. Now they're glands. So if you see this kind of a glandular structure on a esophagus slide, right away you should know these glands. This must be a section from distal end of the esophagus, because only toward to the stomach there may have some glands in the esophageal wall. Okay, next part of the GI tract is the stomach. Okay, so these structures are pretty straightforward, and you can use your lab handout to look at these structures and make sure you can identify them from the models. So if you look at inside, you see this rugae, this ridges. These ridges are the folds, right, inside of this stomach, and they make the surface rough to help physically rupture the big particles. Okay, so that's the function of the rugae. Rugae are folds of mucosa. And if you look at the muscularis externa here, okay, remember I gave you two layers when we talk about the general wall structure, the longitudinal and the circular. Do you remember which one is the deepest, the deeper layer, longitudinal or circular? Circular is inside, longitudinal is outside, right? Okay, for the stomach, because stomach is the major organ for physical digestion, you need to have a huge force help to, tear particles apart. So for this reason, stomach wall, the muscularis externa actually have three layers of smooth muscle cells. The most deeper one is oblique lining muscles, and then the middle one is a circular, and then outside is longitudinal. So three layers of muscles in the muscularis externa. And also there are two sphincters. One sphincter controls how much stuff coming from esophagus into the stomach. And another sphincter right here at the distal end controls how much chyme, or just like very fine particles mixed with the gastric juice, That's called a chyme. This sphincter controls how much chyme get into the duodenum. Okay, if you look at this muscular ridge right here, okay, this sphincter is called a pyloric sphincter. It's much, much stronger than this one, okay, between the esophagus and stomach. Okay, so this one you can actually control very well how much stuff you want to release to the duodenum. But this one is kind of a weak. It's kind of weak. This sphincter is kind of weak. Okay, you can just call it a esophageal stomach sphincter. Okay, so because this sphincter is really weak, we need to have actually help from the diaphragm. Okay, help to control the stuff in the stomach. We don't want to have the particles backflow into the esophagus. Okay, and this is why we say, one of the reasons you do not want to have a big meal and then go to bed right away, because when you are lying down, it's easier, if you have a full stomach, when the stomach is churning, the muscle contractions try to tear the particles apart, it may push the food particles back into the esophagus. That is not good, because in the stomach, you have this structure which can handle very acidic gastric juice, but in the esophagus, you don't. All right, esophagus lining is very simple. This part of lining is just a simple columnar epithelial cells. If you continue chronically having food particles pushed back into esophagus, the acidic particles and fluid can damage the esophageal lining, and this is one common cause for esophageal cancer. All right, so this is right here. Okay, esophagus, last inch of esophagus past the diaphragm connected to the stomach. And here's the blood supplies to this area. If you remember, the celiac trunk gave 3 branches: the left gastric, the splenic, and the common hepatic. So the common hepatic arteries branch out. One forms the hepatic arteries going to the liver. Another forms the right gastric artery to join the left side. And the third one, I told you before, I'm going to give you this artery when we get to the digestive system. So this third branch from common carotid artery is called a gastroduodenal artery, running around the duodenum. Okay, so this is called a gastroduodenal artery. All right, okay, and also now if you look at this splenic artery going to the spleen, right here, splenic artery going to the spleen, and then it's going to branch out to form another artery going around the stomach on this outer curve part. This is called a greater curve right here. This branch of artery is branched out from the splenic artery. It on the left side is called the left gastroepipyloric artery. Left gastroepipyloric artery. So if you have the left one, then there is a right one, right? So the right gastroepipyloric artery is branched out from the gastroduodenal artery. Okay, so I gave you 3 new arteries here. One is gastroduodenal artery. Number 2 is the left gastroepipyloric artery. Number 3 is the right gastroepipyloric artery. You need to know where they come from, and also you should be able to identify them from the pictures. Okay, now we can look at the abdominal wall structure. So here's the wall structure in large. Okay, so again, from the inside is the mucosa, submucosa, muscularis externa, and the serosa in that sequence. Okay, so here is the mucosa. From here all the way down here is the mucosa. Okay, so remember this muscularis mucosa, the smooth muscle layer, but it's still part of mucosa. And then the submucosa is all connective tissue. And then muscularis mucosa, there are 3 layers of muscles in stomach. Deepest one is oblique, and then circular, and then longitudinal. Okay, so if we enlarge just the mucosa layer right here, okay, you can see from the surface, right here is the lumen, you can see this gastric pits is this specialized epithelial cells, specialized to make the glands. So these are specialized cells. One is called parietal cells. They're big, kind of embedded in these neck cells. Another one is called chief cells. Okay, they're more like toward to the bottom of these gastric pits. Okay, so here is more enlarged pictures from this part of the structure. Okay, so here's the parietal cells. Here are the chief cells. So these cells, they have functional aspects you do need to know. Okay, chief cells, they make a protein called pepsinogen, which is a inactive protease, inactivated enzyme to digest the protein. Okay, and parietal cells, they make hydrochloric acid. You learn this in chemistry. This is a very strong acid. All right, so whenever the pepsinogen inactivated enzyme in this very acidic environment, it can be activated into pepsin. So pepsin is an activated enzyme which can digest protein. So we can say the protein digestion, the chemical digestion for protein can take place in stomach because you have pepsin. What type of cells make pepsin? Parietal cells. What is the function for chief cell? To make hydrochloric acid. Okay, and also at the bottom of this gland structure right here, there is a type of cell, it's called enteroendocrine cell. It is also called a G cell. Okay, so this one is an endocrine cell. If it's endocrine cell, then it must make hormone. Endocrine tissue, endocrine cells make hormones, right? So this one, they do make a hormone called gastrin. We'll talk about it later. This hormone, remember, hormone has to travel through the blood circulation to the target. So if you look, this enter endocrine cells, they're kind of on the bottom of this mucosa layer, close to the submucosa. So if you think about a submucosa, that is the connective tissue. You should be able to have a lot of blood vessels in the submucosa. So this is the shortest distance for this the hormone to travel from the G cells all the way to the blood. Okay, that's why you find the G cells at the bottom of this gland structure. Okay, so that is the stomach. This is the stomach lining histology. Okay, so this surface is all mucosa here, and you can see the ridges, rugae, right? and it's the lining is a simple columnar epithelial cells with microvilli. And also here, this part will be the submucosa, all right? And then start from here will be the muscularis externa, okay? So muscularis externa, there are three layers of muscles. This is only part of it, okay? Oblique, circular, and longitudinal. Okay, so this histology, let me see. Basically, it's showing you this gastric pit, okay, and deeper and yeah, toward to the submucosa here. All right, and these are the neck cells, and also there are parietal cells and chief cells, and G cells. And I'm not going to ask you to be able to distinguish these cells from histology picture. If I ask you specific cells, I will use the picture like this to ask you to identify the type of cell and also identify the function of each type of cells. Okay, now this one is give you a anatomy structure for pancreas. I did say we're going to talk about accessory organs next time, but I want to give you an overview first so you have an idea. Next time it will be easier. Okay, so here's the pancreas. All right, here's the duodenum. So you see the pancreas has a ducts to carry the pancreatic juice into the small intestine, specifically to the duodenum area. And out of these ducts, there are different. See, if you look at this one, they have multiple sphincters, which can control how much juice you want to release. But this one, there's no sphincter. So this part is a continuous but a smaller amount of juice continue to release to the duodenum. So what can be found in the pancreatic juice? A lot of enzymes. We'll talk about it next time. And also bicarbonate ions and maybe hormones. No, hormone doesn't cover this way. Hormone goes to the blood, right? So bicarbonate ions and enzymes, all right, they can come into the duodenum by this duct system. And on this side, if you imagine here will be the liver, okay, liver can make a bile. Bile can be collected to these hepatic ducts, two major hepatic ducts, and merge to become a common hepatic duct, and then toward to the duodenum, this one is called a bile duct. Okay, bile duct. And then the bile duct, the function is to release bile. If there's too much of bile, it's too much, the liver made too much of a bile, you don't need to release that much, then the bile will back up through this cystic duct and get to the gallbladder and store over there. Okay, one more time. The bile in the gallbladder is really from this back up in the bile duct and then into the cystic duct and then into the gallbladder and the store over there. Okay, so you can see because of the sphincter structures, the bile and the pancreatic juice can be controlled to release into the duodenum. All right, now is the small intestine wall structure. This part, I really need to have your attention. It can be confusing, okay? So if you look at this small intestine, inside you see a lot of these foldings right here, okay? So on this folding on the surface of this part is the lining cells. These lining cells are simple columnar cells with a lot of microvilli. Okay, so I was thinking You know, if I can give you example to for this part of structure. So if you have like a fuzzy sweater, okay, on your sleeve, you know, you can see this fuzzy surface. Let's say those are the columnar cells with microvilli, and then you pull the sleeve up, okay, on your arm, pull it up, then you're going to have these folds. These are these foldings, okay? So these foldings are made by the submucosal layer, okay? On each of these fold, the surface, you have the mucosal layer, which is made by simple columnar cells. Did you get it? Okay, so this first is this folds. They're called large circular folds. Or there's another name is called, or it is called plica circularis. I'll give you that name in the next slide. So these are these folds. These folds are made by submucosa. On the surface of the submucosa, you're going to have mucosal layer. Okay, so this is a little box here. You're going to enlarge to make this one, okay? So this is basically from one fold. You're going to look at this structure on this side, okay? So these are, let's see, these are right here, okay? This structure is called, hold on. What did I do? Okay, yeah, right here. Okay, so this little lining right here, let me see if I can enlarge this. Okay, so if you look at these part, the lining here, these are the simple columnar cells with microvilli. Yes? Okay, and then this part, this is the fold right here. This is the, remember, it's a submucosal folding. Submucosal folding. And each fold on the surface, you have these mucosal cells. Are you following me? Okay, so if you see this folding right here, okay, this each fold right here on the surface, you're going to have the structure like this. It's called a villi, okay? In each villi, you're going to have blood vessels and the lacteal, which is the lymphatic capillaries, blood capillaries and the lymphatic capillaries, okay? And then if you enlarge these lining cells, you're going to see something like this. Simple columnar epithelial cells with a lot of microvilli. All right, so you're really talking about different levels of folding. Microvilli are the folding of a cell membrane. Okay, and then you have the villi. It's the folding on the surface, and then you have the submucosal folding to make the plica circularis. Let me see the next slide. Probably is easier to understand. Let's see this one. Yeah, okay, this is a better one. Okay, so okay, so if you enlarge the part of this tubular structure, you can see there's a fold right here. There's a fold. Yes, this is a submucosal folding. Submucosal folding. It is called plica circularis. And then on this surface, maybe I should draw this. Okay, let me try to draw this. Enlarge first. Let's see, enlarge button. Okay. Let me see if I can enlarge. What did no? Oops. Did not do it right. I used to have that enlarge button, but I don't see that anymore. Okay, so let me try. All right. This is, oops. This is a plica circularis. That's the fold. I say when you pull up your sleeve, you're going to have these foldings inside of here. Those are called plica circularis. Or there's another name, is called the large circular folds. Okay, and then on each of these plica circularis, if I enlarge this surface, okay, oops, what did I do? Okay, so this is this plica circularis. On each one of this, it's not like this. It's more like yeah. What is? Hold on one second. Let me get a different way. I'm sorry, you guys gave me a second. Okay, I'll have a better way. Okay, I have a better whiteboard now. Okay, so let's see, this is one plica circularis. So we all understand this. This fold is folding of the submucosa. So if I enlarge this part, it actually looks like this. So you have another layer of folding, another level of folding like that, okay? And then where can you find the lining cells? It's this surface. Each part on this surface is lined by simple columnar cells with microvilli. You got it? Okay, so this is the first level of folding. It is by submucosa. And then so this is the submucosa part, and then each part over here, it's the mucosa folding. Okay, mucosa folding right here. And then mucosa folding on the surface, mucosa, the lining cells are the simple columnar epithelial cells with microvilli. So this is the second folding. The first one is called the plica circularis. The second one is called the villi. The third one is called the microvilli, which is the surface cell membrane folding. So 3 layers, 3 levels of folding. Did we get it? Are we good? Okay. All right. So now let me go back to the slides. Okay, so let's look at it again. So here's the plica circularis. Right here is the submucosa, and right here is the what? Muscularis externa, right? So this is definitely submucosa. And then you enlarge this. Okay, you can see on this plica circularis, you have these little folds on the surface. That's these. Okay, so these are called villi. Okay, so villi is the folding of mucosa. See, it's a mucosa layer. All right. So in the villi, the mucosa layer, see right here, this is the muscularis mucosa. All right. This is the edge or the landmark to distinguish the mucosa from, or to separate mucosa from submucosa. So these blood vessels, blood capillaries, and lymphatic capillaries can extend it into each villus, like this. Okay, blood capillaries, and this green one is called lacteal, which is lymphatic capillary. Okay, also have nerve endings into each villus. All right, and then if you enlarge the from one villus, you can see these lining cells. Okay, lining cells. All right, and these lining cells, you have simple columnar epithelial cells, but this one is not really good. Simple columnar epithelial cells, these white ones are the goblet cells, all right, which can secrete mucus. Okay, so this is a very important concept. You need to understand this. Please use your textbook and go over this part again. Okay, so this is a small intestine. You can see each one of this. What is that? Each one of this structure is a villus. Okay, inside here, and on each villus, you have these simple columnar cells with microvilli. Okay, so this is the small intestine structure. One more time, mucosa from here all the way down to here, and here's the submucosa, and then muscularis externa and a serosa. 2 layers of serosa to make a mesentery. Good. All right. Large intestine is much easier, the structure, okay? So if we look at the tubular structure, we know there's a muscularis externa, but in the large intestine, less muscle contraction needed for either absorption or digestion. So the muscularis externa kind of degenerated and then specialized. So we have the ring structure right here. This is the muscle ring structure. Do I have the structure right here labeled? Right here. Tennae coli. See that word? Tennae coli. These are the muscle strains on the surface of large intestine. There are three strains, 3 lines of this one. Is called a tennae coli. It is just a specialized muscularis externa. Okay, and also on the surface there are some drop appendages, epiploic appendages, like a kind of like a fat drops. We don't really know the function of that, but we have this structure. Okay, and this part is the appendix. We already know this is the part, the small intestine connected to the cecum, the beginning of the large intestine. This is the ileum, the distal part of ileum connects to the cecum. There's a sphincter right here. It's called ileocecal valve. Okay, so this sphincter will allow stuff to get into the large intestine and to prevent stuff coming back to the small intestine. So for this part, it's pretty straightforward, and I like you to use the lab handout to go over the anatomical structures from the models online. Okay, so this is the large intestine histology picture. Okay, let me share the whiteboard with you here. Okay, so if I have structure, if you look at the histology structure is kind of like this, okay, all right, and so this is the lumen right here, and so here is the cell lined here, and then you have something like here, sometimes, you know, uh, let's see if I do another one, kind of go deeper, yeah. So you have this V-like structure protruded into the lumen. This is more, most likely is a small intestine structure, okay? But if you see something like this, okay, again, here's the lumen, all right? So you have cells, you know, lines, still the simple columnar cells, but less microvilli now, like this. Okay, cells lines. Then this one is more likely the large intestine structure. So let me show you the real slide. See, this one is the lumen right here. Okay, you're going down like this. Oh, I can't draw. Oops, freeze now. Okay, it's down, up, down, up, like that. So here are the lining cells. The white ones are the goblet cells. You got an idea? Okay, so this is the large intestine lining cells. If you look at the small intestine, see, they're kind of protruded in, like, and then in, like that. Okay, into the lumen right here. You got it? Okay. And then this one is anal canal. So the defecation here, you know, most of the water and all of the nutrients have been absorbed, and then it's just the waste. It can be dry, it can be rough. So in this part of the tubular structure, you have this stratified squamous epithelial lining. Again, it's the same as in the mouth. Okay, so because of the stuff going through this part can be rough. All right, so this type of lining can repair and regenerate well. Okay, and under the lining, again, you're going to see a lot of lymphoid follicles, okay, for detecting any abnormal stuff. Okay, so this is the end of today's lecture. Okay, so we basically covered the GI tract anatomy, and then next time we're going to focus on the accessory organs and also the physiology part of the gastric, of the digestive system. All right, so let me just stop this recording now.